Hello and very happy Halloween to you all. Here at Prose, we don't necessarily have any exciting All Hallows Eve plans. However, I hope that you all do, and that you're all getting decked out in your finest costumes and preparing to commune with all things dark. Or just eat a lot of candy, whichever. This year for the Halloweenisode 2019, I'm bringing back a couple stories of darkness from previous episodes. So, to celebrate Halloween, we have The Very Dark and Doppleganger. The latter being performed and read by the wonderful and talented amazing guest author, Nicholas B. Morris. Stick around. Let's get frightened together. The Very Dark, a short story by Jared I. McGee. I had never really understood what galumphing was. I mean, I get that Carol threw together two words, galloping and triumphant, or some such nonsense, but I had never seen a person or a creature move in that strange, loping manner. That is until I went to the edge of the Very Dark. I saw the whatever, come at exactly 3 a.m. It came galumphing down the hill in what little moonlight was present that evening. The backdrop of the darkest dark I had ever seen was up behind it. Black velvet that seemed to eat the paltry light from the nearly non-existent moon and the sickly little stars. I'm not entirely certain as to why it came out of the Very Dark, but it did. The whatever burst forth from the terrifying inkiness with a lipless grin on its face. A grin. A snarl. Honestly, it was difficult to tell. All I know is that I could see its flat, large, squarish, yellowing teeth even in the darkness. Its face was not more than a skull, which was terrifying in and of itself, but the rest of the whatever was mind-bogglingly mismatched and confusing, simultaneously elevating my terror and my confusion-tinted curiosity. What looked to be an apish body, hunched on all fours and covered in what seemed to be a dark-colored fur. Its back legs had huge haunches resembling a kangaroo's. Its long arms were the sinuous forelimbs of a gorilla's. I could not see its hands, feet, paws, whatever, as it was moving through the brush, as they were hidden. The beast also had two sets of horns. The tiny little devil horns, most often seen in comical sketches of the spawns of a cartoonish hell, were situated more toward the top of its head, and a pair of massive stag's antlers, branching out so high from the temples of its head and so far beyond its shoulders, I could not understand how the creature kept its head up and moved so deftly with that horned bulk. The last feature I remember vividly from my spotting the whatever was the one that struck me as the most odd of all. It had something resembling a tree sprouting from the crown of its skull. Maybe this was to serve as camouflage. Maybe this was just another odd horn that I couldn't quite make out clearly, but I swear that it looked like a gnarled, angular old tree sprouting right out of its head. The whatever broke out of the Very Dark at a full run. It stopped, sniffed the air, if that's even possible with those holes in its skull face, paced forward a few paces, sniffed again, paced left, listened, paced right, listened, made a wet coughing sound with its face aimed to the sky, then, to my utter horror, it looked right at me. Hollow sockets met my eyes, and though I was hidden away in a decent distance from that frightful monstrosity, I swear it knew I was there, met my eyes, and smiled. With that widening of its grin and snarl combined does not work as well as gallop and triumphant, I guess. It quickly turned away from me and hurtled back into the blacker than black of the Very Dark. To be honest, I can't recall what took me out to the hill that night. I vaguely remember some research that led me to believe that I could see into the very dark then, something about liminal times, what happens to those in-between spaces, and the like. And Arnold van Gennep here, Diana Wynne Jones' novel there. But that small amount of generic reading simply couldn't have led me to the hill at that time. I think I was meant to be there. Just one of those gut things. I was drawn there by the same unnamed forces that created the very dark and the whatever. The specificity of my description of the beast does, I know, make the vagueness of what I know of the very dark that much more front and center. Believe me, it's frustrating to me too. I know that the very dark is, in case it's not easy to guess, very, extremely, extraordinarily devoid of light. Aggressively, oppressively so. I know that the references to the very dark have a way of popping up in God knows how many folktales, legends, myths, expressions, and damned near anything else created by humans. Lastly, and most importantly, I know that the very dark is not a good place. It wants to hurt us. It is actively seeking to harm humans, to chip away at our happiness, our population, our existence. The whatever is just an ambassador of a greater doom that humanity cannot avoid. Those dark things from your nightmares, those horrifying tales from myriad cultures' distant pasts, the prickles on your neck and the corresponding sickness in your stomach when you're alone. Those macabre fictional stories that just come to a writer seemingly from nowhere. They are all tapping into that other world. They are all pale reflections of the badness that seeps into our world from theirs. The very dark is inching ever forward toward us, and for some reason, I am running headlong into it. Maybe Yeats' visit to the very dark is finally making some sense. Maybe those 20 centuries of stony sleep have finally run their course, and the rough beast has finally decided that Bethlehem really is ready for its new ruler. Thank you for listening to The Very Dark, an original short story by Jared I. McGee. All sound effects and backing tracks for The Very Dark were taken from freesound.org, an amazing community based on sharing that enhances a great many projects. These particular effects are provided by many different free sound contributors, including Nick Stage on the dark guitar sounds. The haunting piano portion is from Sutuneman, whose extensive soundtrack work can be found at pond5.com. Psych93 created the low drone sounds, Raspberry Tickle with the ominous ambience, and Fedexo recorded the echoed thumping. All these sounds are being used under a Creative Commons Attribution Share-alike License 3.0. I hope you've enjoyed this little tale of creepiness and the dark. Next up, Doppleganger by Nicholas B. Morris. Doppleganger by Nicholas B. Morris.
On my late morning walk, I noticed a man on my trail. I didn't recognize him, just noticed that he followed me. I made turns that I wouldn't normally, and he copied me every time. He kept a fair distance, but gained ground with every step. I decided to borrow an unattended bike, and once I started pedaling, he dropped behind me quickly. I thought I saw him go for his phone, so I turned downhill and headed for the center of town. The pursuit left me famished, and the sun hung high enough in the sky to have lunch. I stashed the bike behind a dumpster in case he had called me in to whomever he worked for, and stopped in at a little Chinese restaurant called the Moongate Bistro. The place has my favorite qualities: good food, cheap prices, fast service, a view of the street, and an easy escape into the back alley. I ordered my favorite dish, sesame chicken, and kept an eye on the street. I finished my meal and asked for the check. It came back with 2 fortune cookies. I paid in cash and opened the first. Its fortune looked as bland as the color of the cookie. You shall be very prosperous. Hoping the staff responsible for spell-checking the fortunes hadn't also cooked the food, I crushed the first cookie and opened the second. It read, "Wonder not if the world hates you." As I ate the second cookie, I contemplated its fortune. Should I not wonder because it loved me, or because its contempt of me was so open that I shouldn't bother wondering? The cookie tasted no different than the dozens of others I had eaten previously at the Moongate. No better, no worse. It was just a cookie, its unusual fortune of no particular consequence, just less generic than others. But this message held a unique meaning. Someone meant that message specifically for me. The street bustled, especially for the time of day, early afternoon, and it looked like a rain shower might soon roll in. I thought of the cookie again, and the fact that I had no umbrella and several dozen blocks to walk. Still, that seemed hardly enough reason for such an omen. From the corner of my eye, a man caught my attention, mostly because he wore the same light tan sport coat as me. He styled his hair in the exact same manner as mine. Even his walk looked similar to my own gait. He turned, glanced at me, and kept moving in the other direction. His face reflected a replica of my own. I followed after him, determined to prove myself wrong, or, if not wrong, then ask who had sent him, and if he knew anything about the message in the cookie. He maintained a brisk walk, but the fact that I knew his exact outfit and the pace at which I should move led me to catch up with him before long, and I kept a safe distance from which to keep an eye on him. He went into a bookstore, and seconds later I entered behind him. He climbed the stairs, browsing through the fiction section. I moved into drama and poetry, picked up a book, and pretended to read. He worked his way around the room, picking up many books, but holding none of them for long. I got glimpses at his face, but could not definitively say, one way or the other, that he was or was not my double. I hoped, if nothing else, he would look over at me, notice that we wore the same clothes, perhaps comment on the fact we had dressed alike, and confirm our differences, if not by look, then by voice, so that I could go on about my day. But he never glanced in my direction. He eventually chose a book from the sci-fi section, The Invisible Man, I think, and made his way downstairs. Obliged to see this through, I picked up a different book from the one I'd pretended to read and followed him. I saw him standing on line and took my place several people behind him, hoping we could get the same cashier, and maybe he or she would tell me. But we didn't. He had a tall man with a mustache, and I had a small girl with highlights in her dark hair. As I paid for my book, William Wilson and Other Tales by Edgar Allan Poe, apparently, I asked the girl if she'd noticed someone who looked like me online just before me. "I don't pay attention to anyone before they stand in line, or after they stand in line," she said, pushing the receipt and change at me. "I can help who's next," she said to the woman behind me. I took my book and moved toward the front of the store. I could not see in which direction he'd gone. Dejected, I started toward home again. The rain fell in fat drops, cold when they hit the skin on my hands and face. I owned a book in which I had no interest, couldn't find my doppelganger, and a strange fortune cookie had ruined my day. I stood in the rain until the light stopped the flow of cars, allowing me to cross the street. Wonder not if the world hates you, indeed. And then he appeared before me, stepping into the Moongate Bistro. I smiled, moved a few shops down from him, popped inside, and browsed near the window. Other pedestrians joined me in waiting out the storm, so the clerks paid me little attention, and for a half hour I looked at the same items over and over again. As I waited, keeping as close a watch as I could, I wondered if he would actually eat or gather information on me, what I'd eaten, or perhaps my reaction to the fortune. Maybe he'd spotted me and slipped into Moongate to escape through the back alley. Maybe he watched me even now, him or one of his associates, like the man who followed me earlier, boxing me in before they make their move. He finally came out and moved toward my house. I put the book I'd bought on a shelf and followed him. The rain continued to fall, though not as heavily as before. Every turn he made, I gained a little ground. Finally, I caught up with him. Even his hair hung in the same pattern as mine, droplets of rain clinging off of the exact same locks. His hands shared the same texture as mine, and from my close vantage point and with my sharp eyes, I discerned a small white scar along his left thumb, the same size and shape of the scar on my own thumb. "Excuse me," I said, or murmured, because I had to repeat it louder a few steps later. "Excuse me." He finally turned to me, and, as I suspected, his face mirrored my own. From that distance, no more than a few feet, I could not make a mistake. "Yes," he said. No form of recognition lighted on his face. "Don't you find it strange we look so much alike?" I panted, moving alongside him. "You look like me. I look just like you." "Oh," he said, keeping his stride, my stride. "A little, I guess." "Exactly," I said. "I saw you a ways back and had to know if you were my doppelganger or something." "No," he said. "I don't think so." "At least admit we dress alike," I said. "I'm wearing the same jacket as you. Your hair is just like mine." He looked at me, puzzled. "Not really?" His voice trailed off. "Yes, we do." I put a hand in front of him, brought him to a stop. "We do," I said. "Fine," he said. "You agree that we look alike?" "Sure. Exactly alike." He shook his head. "If you think so." "I don't think so," I said, stepping closer to him. "We do." "Okay," he said. "Can I go now?" "And you don't find it coincidental that we look alike?" He shrugged. "The world's a weird place." "And it hates me," I said. "That was the message you wanted me to get, isn't it?" "What? How did you find me?" I grabbed a handful of his jacket. "How many of you are there?" "What are you talking about?" His pupils darted back and forth. "You heard me. That's my house right there." I pointed across the street. "How did you find me?" "That's my house," he said. "What do you want from me?" Water ran down his face. Whether sweat or rain, I could not say. "Let go of me, man!" He struggled and broke free from my grip, but he stumbled and fell backward into the street. A car slammed on its brakes and hit him, sending him over the roof and onto the pavement. As the blood pooled around him, I conceded one of his points. His jacket had 3 buttons, and mine only 2. His looked a little darker as well, more olive than tan, which I hadn't noticed before. Police and ambulance arrived several minutes later. The lady who hit him moaned in hysterics. The police required a statement from me. I told them I'd ask him a question, and, in answering, he had stumbled into the street. An accident, I pointed out. They seemed to agree. No one commented on our resemblance. The rain hammered down, pounding the sidewalk beneath my feet. I tried to get into my house after they completed their reports, but the keys no longer worked. My attempts to pry open a window failed as well. I looked around. Nothing moved. Nothing made a sound. Not even the birds sang. They, whoever sent the doppelganger for me, knew my location. I moved in the opposite direction they would expect, back the way I'd come. I stepped into a cafe, sat down at their bar, ordered hot tea. I asked where I could find the bathroom. My soaked clothes felt pasted onto my skin, which felt sticky for reasons I didn't understand. Perhaps some of his blood splashed on me during the accident. In the bathroom, I washed my hands, first with cold water, then soap, then hot water, then cold again. Small flecks of blood resisted cleaning, but most of it scrubbed off easily. My clothes clung to my body, wet but not stained, so I washed my face. My face. My face no longer belonged to me. Someone else's face stared back from the mirror. I touched my face, and he touched his jaw. We reached for each other. I felt his fingers. I forged a connection between reflection and reality until they converged, identical. Only Tile resided behind the bathroom mirror. No camera spied on the bathroom. They bugged it then. How else could they track my movements so quickly? Maybe they put someone else on me when I gave the statement to the police. Maybe the police knew about it too and waited for me to make a move. Only a matter of time before they sent the next doppelganger to kill me after the new change to my face. I had to keep moving. I left the bathroom, waved off the tea from the barista at the counter, stepped onto the street, and headed toward the bus terminal. Or would have, had not a man with my face, my exact face, the new one, walked past me at precisely that moment. I had no choice but to follow him.
Thank you for listening to Doppelganger by Nicholas B. Morris. The author grew up in Arkansas but fell in love with Colorado. His stories and other assorted writings have been published in the Harpoon Review, Cliterature, Connotation Press, Danse Macabre Online, and Nebo. He has published 2 short story collections, the full-length Tapeworm and the chapbook The Boy in the Well, both with now sadly defunct Monkey Puzzle Press. You can buy copies of Tapeworm from him directly on Amazon. He works his dream job as assistant professor of humanities at the Community College of Denver and watches endless reruns of Star Trek with his partner, Alyssa Pacini. Caleb Hicks produced the original audio for the narrative. He and Mr. Morris worked closely together on the spoken album of Mr. Morris's stories called The Boy in the Well. All music and sound effects, save the Paul-stretched flute, were taken from the Free Music Archive at freemusicarchive.org, an amazing community of artists that set out to help one another through the sharing of their art. Lazy Monk contributed the doorbells, Jormap contributed the street sounds, and Edity Joe contributed the epic orchestra piece. A sincere thank you to the artists and freemusicarchive.org for the contribution. All of these sounds are being used under a Creative Commons Attribution Share-alike License 4.0. The Paul-stretched flute is an original sound effect. This episode of Prose has been produced by me, Jared I. McGee. If you enjoyed this episode, please head over to iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher to leave us a review.
I certainly hope you've enjoyed
this nice retelling of dark tales. May your All Hallows be perfectly creepy, perfectly safe, and perfectly fun. Much love from Prose to you, and a very, very happy Halloween to you all.